Bienvenido a Mambo Podcast. Si te gusta la vaina, suscríbete a la vaina, dale like a la vaina y comparte la vaina. Mambo.
Le pasamos la cuchilla de nuevo por preso. Déjalo loco, dijo la coge por estupidito. Allá. You got it.
You said in Spanish, most people call you what?
Either like Rayleigh or Tomas.
Mm.
Yeah, Tomas.
And Riley, your middle name.
Yeah, Riley's my middle name. But that's what I've always gone by growing up. And like my teachers and stuff will call me Thomas because like it says that on all the paperwork and stuff. So like when I was in El Salvador, I told people that my name was Tomas because it was just easier to say.
Oh, cool. El Salvador. And how was how did that come about that you were in El Salvador?
I was actually down in El Salvador last spring break for a mission trip with my college ministry that I work with here at the University of Oregon, installing water filters and helping bring clean water to a bunch of families that needed it. It was, yeah.
Cool. Any other countries you visited?
I was in Bolivia when I was like 4 months old. Because my mom is from Bolivia, so we went back when I was very young. I've been to Mexico, in Cozumel, for scuba diving, and Honduras in Roatan for scuba diving as well. That's about it so far. But I'm planning on traveling a lot soon, God willing.
Oh, and then how old are you now?
I turned 20 earlier this year, so
Wow.
not too old.
Well, as a 20-year-old, you have a lot of traveling experience, and your vast knowledge of rhythms it's impeccable. Because I know at that age when I was 20, I know I was stuck on Latin rhythms, and even though I loved rhythms from like Colombia and Honduras, I still didn't I didn't have a broad understanding of how the claves kind of intermingled with each other. That no one ever explained that to me. But you seem like you have a good grasp on the clave.
On the clave, yeah. I think it's really fascinating looking at all the like different musical traditions, especially within like the African diaspora and like throughout Latin America and in the Caribbean and South America, North America. You can see how like the influences of like the concept that we call clave is like present in some sense in every rhythm. You can kind of pinpoint some sort of clave and like apply like a direction to it, which I think is really cool. It just shows the common roots and the common heritage that like all this music has and how interconnected it is, and just like the stories of like these rhythms traveling from country to country and how they influenced each other and created whole new genres. It's really fascinating.
Wow, and still growing.
Yeah.
Wow, there's instruments that I keep catching out there that have such similarities and distinctively used. There's this instrument that's used in both Curacao and in Venezuela. I don't know the name of it, but it's similar to a guira. They use it sideways, except that in Curacao it's a cylinder-like, and in Venezuela most of the time it's only one-sided.
I think they call that charrasca. Or either Tarasca or Carrasca. I can't remember which one, but yeah, like in gaita in Venezuela. I think the like genre or the rhythm. The
Mm,
big like gaita drum that they play with the two really thick sticks, and then that little charasca, I think is what it's called.
oh,
Yeah.
that I know which one you're saying. That it has like a long thin stick that as you move it up and down, it has different vibrations on
Oh,
the skin.
is that what you're talking about?
Oh no no
I don't
no!
know what that one's
In
called, but
that style of music, they use that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know what
Wow.
that one's called, but it's kind of like a cuica from Brazil. Like similar concept that with a big pole and you rub it and it creates the vibrations in the head.
Now, how did you get into what's this called samba?
Samba.
Sou virador, eu vou cantar com muito orgulho, com muito amor. Esse jogo vai virar, eu quero ser o vencedor.
Like Brazilian samba?
Yes.
Well, kind of the same way that I got into everything else. Um, there was like, so I guess just for context, I'll start at the beginning because it answers a lot of other questions too, but also this question with the samba, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
Cool. Um, my mother was born and raised in Bolivia in La Paz, and came to the States after graduating high school, I think it was. She met my dad after going to, um, I think it was George Fox University here in Oregon. And then they went and spent some time after getting married in Ecuador teaching English. And while they were both teaching English in, I think it was Guayaquil, they were. Um, they got a lot of just like being there. They bought a lot of CDs of the music that was popular in Ecuador at the time. A lot of music like from Chichi Peralta and Ilegales and Sentidos Opuestos, Shakira, um, El General.
Wow.
lots of those lots of that kind of music, those CDs, and then they brought that all back home, and then they had me in Oregon, in the States, and I was raised with like Spanish and English being like my first languages at the same time, um, and also grew up listening to all of that music along with other music, but all of that music was like a very important part of my childhood. Um, and then I went to started going to school, to public school, and in kindergarten I realized like, oh, no one here speaks Spanish. Like I don't need to keep speaking Spanish like outside of home because it's not useful for as a kindergartner, as a 5-year old. um, and then so I started gradually losing my Spanish just because of all the time spent at school and with friends and people who didn't speak Spanish, and I would only ever speak Spanish with my mom at home. Um, and that kind of continued on. I lost a lot of that, unfortunately. And about 6-ish years ago, 6 maybe 7 years ago, is when I went down to Cozumel in Mexico for a scuba diving trip with my family. Um, and something I think I was like I realized, oh, like everything's in Spanish here, and I understand like all of it, and like things started coming back to me. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what that means. That's how this works. This just feels right. It makes sense. Um, and like I was in like the dive place that we were staying at, and the radio was turned on, and they were playing like reggaeton, on the radio, and I was just kind of passively listening to it. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Like these are like they're using the same samples in like this song, using the same samples in a different way in this song, but they're like the same samples. And I got really intrigued by that. So I came home and I started looking into reggaeton because I was really curious about just the sound and why it made me want to dance and that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, this is strange. My body is moving and I don't know why. Um, so I got really interested in the history of that, and I started trying to like make my own. I found I did a bunch of digging through the internet to find like history and samples that I could use, and like finding the original samples and like tracing back the history to like where all these rhythms and samples and like came from originally, and like the history with the interaction between Panama and Jamaica, and Puerto Rico, and how that kind of all came in and made reggaeton. And then I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of this one song that I grew up with, from an Ilegales album called Sigue Bailando. So I went and found that, and I was like, oh, this is, I remember this like from deep in the past. And then I remembered all of my other childhood music, and then I started listening to Chichi Peralta again. I dug up those old CDs and played them, and it was this huge wave of nostalgia. This crazy thing. It's like, wow, this is incredible. This like resonates really deep in my core for some reason. And there was this little sound in the back of like a lot of Chichi Peralta's music, like, and I was like, what is that sound? It sounds so unique. For a while I thought it was like an 808 drum machine hi-hat, like that they use in trap and other kinds of music. It's like, that's strange. Why would they use that in this kind of music? And why does it sound like improvised? And there's all these other little variations and stuff. So for a while I thought it was that. And then eventually I stumbled across a video on my YouTube recommended page of the video of Masta Cris playing, I think it was like Muerte Guira is the name of the video. And that I had an epiphany. It was like, oh, that is the instrument that's making that noise. And here it is being played in this incredible way. And I was already a musician, like a percussionist at that time. Like throughout all of middle school and throughout high school, especially, was trained in like Western classical percussion. So a lot of marimba, snare drum, timpani, all that kind of stuff. And I'd gone to lots of state competitions, district competitions, and done really well in solos and ensembles and stuff. And then I discovered La Huira, like from that video and from all that music that I had rediscovered it, and I got hooked. So I went on Amazon and I got one like refurbished. It was one of the smaller LP guitas. It's the one that I used in all of my really old videos, like a long time ago. Not super great, but it got the job done.
Yeah.
So I started like trying to figure out how to play that. So I found more videos of Masta Cris and like Enrique Guira, and like just searching on YouTube like guireros. And I found videos of people playing like really virtuosically. And YouTube has like the function where you can slow down the video. So I did that, and I watched their wrists and like heard the sounds they were making. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to copy what they're doing note by note, sound by sound, to like try to get the nuance, because I was really, really intrigued. Kind of around that time, I started like posting little videos of my progress that I was making. And a friend, now a friend of mine, but a guy whose name is Murilo Pontes from Brazil, reached out to me because he saw what I was doing, and he was thinking about making like a guira course in Brazil called Aprenda a Guira, all in Portuguese. And um, that intrigued me. I was like, okay, here's a first resource that I have found that's like guira instruction. So I think I was at least one of the maybe the first or the second person to get the course when it was released. And I was talking with Murilo like as he was working on it, and we've done a bunch of collaborations since. But some of those videos helped me and gave me ideas just to like flesh out some of the technique, because he had been talking with people like Biga Marley and a couple other guireros, like I'm forgetting the names of at the moment. And that kind of led to everything else. It was the guira first was like the gateway to everything else, and then the tambora, and then the congas, because that kind of happened at the same time, because we had congas in my high school, and I was like, oh, I want to learn how to actually play these, not play them like some Western percussionist who doesn't know anything about hand percussion. So I was like, okay, how do people play this? How do you make all these different sounds? What do my hands do? What are the rhythms? And what was really fascinating to me at the time was hearing how this like improvisational music, because I'm a jazz musician as well. I play jazz drums and piano, and was playing in jazz band and was learning about all these influences on jazz music, especially the improvisational aspect, and learning like, oh, where do some of these rhythms come from? And I looked into that, and I saw like you could see all these examples of different rhythms where there's like, I don't know, 5 different parts, or say 3 different parts, and they're different parts, but they interlock in this really unique way where each person has one unique job, and by themselves they sound all right, not too interesting, but when you combine them together, then it's this new texture that's like a combination of different personalities, in a way, the personalities of the people playing them, but also the instruments themselves. And that was really fascinating to me, and I wanted to learn more about these different rhythms with all these different parts that interlocked in these really cool ways, and where I found, like, from a very abstract music theory kind of perspective, I found them very mathematically interesting in some ways. That's a whole other conversation, but so that hooked me on like the congas, and I learned how to play congas, and then learned how to play tambora at a very basic level. This was a long time ago. And then like I started following different pages on Instagram that like posted videos of people playing like the congas or something, and then I would see on the same page like featured videos of people playing percussion from other countries or from other traditions, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, I want to learn that one. So I started doing that, and eventually just kind of once I kind of got the feel for how to even approach those kinds of things, I kind of went down the list at least a little bit with the countries I was interested in. And I've started, my methodology was to do a ton of listening, to just kind of immerse myself in the sound, to just know what it sounds like. So I'm not really thinking about it. Oh boy.
Sorry about that.
Are we good? No worries, no worries. Yeah, the goal is to get to where I'm not really thinking about playing, I'm more just like feeling playing. So it's like I make decisions in playing a rhythm, like on the congas or on the guira or the repiki, and that I don't have to think about. It just feels right because it sounds right, like within the genre. It's like anyone learning a new language. This is like how I try to explain and help teach people learning how to play quinto in rumba. is like I start off by saying, okay, like you can improvise kind of. So they think, oh, that means I can play whatever I want. I was like, no, you cannot do that. That is not correct. Um, so I try to explain it from like a language standpoint. So like if I'm learning a new language, um, like a spoken language, like Spanish or Portuguese or Arabic or whatever, or English right now, like I'm improvising with my words in the sense that I'm forming a sentence, um, like on the spot, and it's coming out and being communicated. But it's not like a bunch of random noise that doesn't make sense. Like it's placed in a certain way. I'm using vocabulary that we both understand to convey meaning, and it's like the same with quinto playing or with guira playing. There's like words or little phrases, sentences that you can make that are idiomatic to this style that just makes sense. And after you do that for a little bit, you start to become fluent to where you don't even think about it anymore. It just happens because you're fluent in the language of guira or quinto or whatever. I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry, but yeah, one thing led to another. Kind of went down the list country by country, learning about all the instruments, the styles of music, the rhythms, and still am like in each separate world, like digging more, trying to learn more. But Brazil was one specifically that kind of took off for me, because I had a lot of Brazilian friends, like just from like the whole Aprenda Guira course and Murilo and some other guys, and like me learning Portuguese and practicing with them. I had some friends, so I was interested in that aspect, and especially the music aspect. The percussion aspect is very cool and more popular online and easier to find information about online, which is always a benefit when you're learning online.
Yes.
But I met a guy here at the University of Oregon maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago, who was interested in samba. He had gone down to Brazil for like a month or so to learn some samba, and he found out about me and my interests. So we connected, and we together started a bateria here, a club called Duck Samba for the Oregon Ducks, dedicated just to the tradition of samba, especially samba enredo from Rio, from Rio de Janeiro. And he left. He was the president, and I was the vice president for the first like year or so. And like just during that time, I really had the incentive to learn as much as I could, and just get really good at each of the instruments. The tamborim, chocalho, repique, mor, sulus, caixa, so that I could teach people. Like, it's one thing to learn something and just be able to play it. It's another thing to be able to teach it. It's like if you got to teach something, you got to really, really know it well. You got to know all the nuances so you can help people out and like fix their positioning. So that was my like really big incentive with samba at the time. And he left at the end of the year to go pursue job opportunity on the East Coast in Massachusetts, which left me in charge. So now I'm in charge of Duck Samba. I teach the ensemble. I lead rehearsals, all the arrangements and everything. I had a friend from New York. His name is Dana Monteiro. He leads a group called Harlem Samba. He flew down for a week to work with me and the group. Learned a lot during that week. But that's kind of what got me on the samba. And I do a lot of that now and really, really enjoy it. I don't share as much, just because my audience is pretty catered one way. So as I'm kind of like trying to ease in a lot of the other music that I like playing as well to like hopefully like expand, I guess, my sphere of influence or audience to other countries and to just kind of bring in like more harmony with different countries and like combining stuff. I've done some like mixtures with samba and like merengue in the past. There's one video I'm thinking of. It's like a minute long. I like added some pambiche, merengue derecha, or derecho into the samba, and I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, there's a long answer to your question.
That is a great explanation. You did great in your explanation, and I love the fact that you didn't rush yourself because those details really make a difference. 'Cause what stood out a
Yeah.
lot towards the end of your explanation, the teaching aspect.
Mm,
It's also it has a lot to do with knowing how to be a student, the learning curve,
mm-hmm,
forgiving yourself when there's something
mm-hmm,
that's difficult, enjoy yourself when you figure something out, and don't be afraid to share it. So in the end, sometimes every and any student has the possibility of being a teacher. It just matters how much they accept the student aspect of it. So I admire you for that.
yeah.
That's really cool that you've accepted that responsibility, because when you get to a certain comfort level where it becomes second nature, like you said, that it flows through you. Now you're
Mm-hmm,
allowing this to flow through you at will and sharing the gifts to others who would like to receive. I believe that when sharing
mm,
music, it's giving light, and so
yeah.
in the end, it's a communication of light. So it's not, it can't be chaotic, like you said with the quinto. You can't just ham away
Yeah.
at the skin and expect for it to fall into time. There is a pattern to this. There is a
Uh-huh,
feel to it. So as you
uh-huh.
immerse yourself, you start realizing it's okay to just let go and feel the groove. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool. You know? I've been meaning to ask your last name. What's the story on your background with your last name?
That's actually something I haven't really looked into a lot. Um, Maybe a tiny bit. Galt is like I think it's like an English or kind of Irish um, last name, pretty Germanic, I think, and it meant. I looked this up online once, and the website I found said like people with the last name Galt, like a long time ago, were like um the people who like hunted boars or something.
Wow.
It's like the family. I I don't really know.
Mambo Podcast. Si te gusta la vaina, suscríbete a la vaina, dale like a la vaina y comparte la vaina. Mambo.